Hello and welcome to the Week 2 Coach Ranking Show. I am your host, Ian O'Connor, Senior Data Analyst at Football Outsiders. And joining me as always, my co-host, Vince Verhei, Football Outsiders Assistant Editor. Now, we don't have our full rankings yet. There are still a handful of teams that haven't had very many significant fourth down situations yet. We'll get to those in the coming weeks. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the worst and some of the best decisions on fourth down from the past weekend. We'll also look at some matchups coming up this weekend that are some of the biggest matchups. That Buffalo-Miami, the one I think everyone's got circled this week. And then we'll also recap here at the top that matchup between Andy Reid and Brandon Staley. I know it was last Thursday, but there was a lot going on between those two teams. Before we get in, Vince, I got a question for you. Do you like free money?
You know, Ian, I really do.
All right, I think most people would say that. And we've got great news for those of you out there watching that do like free money. If you play on Underdog Fantasy with us, you can double your first deposit. They'll give you up to $100 for free. Promo code OUTSIDERS. So just make a deposit. They'll double your deposit up to $100. And even with the NFL best ball season over, Underdog does have other user-friendly game formats to spice up all the NFL games. You can do their Battle Royale, which is a 6-round best ball style draft with simpler chances to win than you traditionally see in some of those daily fantasy sports sites. We're going up against hundreds of thousands of people. You can also try their pick'em games where you can wager on players' chances to go higher or lower than their projected stat lines. That's one that I really like to do. Did that on Monday night. Mike Tanier and I talked through that on our Monday recap show. I actually won that one, so it was a good Monday night. But you can do that even in states where traditional prop betting currently is not available. Underdog is the fastest growing fantasy site around, so join the fun over at UnderdogFantasy.com or download the Underdog app in the App Store and use promo code OUTSIDERS now to double your first deposit up to $100. Now we'll jump right into that recap I mentioned from last week. The big matchup on Thursday night was a really good one. Chargers got up. The Chiefs came back, went up. It kind of got boring. And then Justin Herbert made some magic there at the end of the game. They fell short, had a chance to recover that onside kick, weren't able to get it. But Vince, what did you see from this game? I know we previewed the coaching strategies as far as we talked about not blitzing Mahomes. We saw Arizona kind of mess that up the week before. What happened in that game on Thursday night?
Well, we said the Chargers would need to use a lot of zone coverage, drop guys back, take away the deep ball, and try to rely on their front four to win. And I wrote in quick reads this week. What was Patrick Mahomes' standout stat this week? He was the week's best passer on throws to his running backs. He completed all 8 of his passes for 50 yards and a touchdown. That's very good for the Chiefs and all, but Chiefs wide receivers only got 10 passes. None of them had more than 50 yards. And it was a much quieter day from Mahomes, but much quieter day from the Chiefs. And frankly, the Chargers should have won, except for one huge critical mistake, the pick six thrown to Gerald Everett when he was exhausted and trying to tap out. And if it's not for that one critical error, the Chargers probably win this game by maybe even a couple of scores.
Yeah, a couple other mistakes. That was the big one, the pick six, obviously. Asante Samuel Jr. also had a couple interceptions that he should have had for the Chargers. Wasn't able to corral those. A couple days later, the very next day on Friday night, his alma mater, Florida State, did get a big interception to win the game against Louisville. But Asante Samuel really struggled. He's going to want a couple of those back. Obviously, there were a lot of other chances. The Chargers, as you mentioned, were kind of in control up to that point. And just really that big mistake, Everett wanted out, going up tempo, and it did not look good. Now, as far as the fourth down aggressiveness, that's something that we talked about last week. It was a little different than we expected these coaches to be pretty aggressive. They weren't. Andy Reid had a 4th and goal at the 1 where he chose to kick the field goal, usually pretty strong. This was down 3 at the start of the 4th quarter. I know kicking the field goal ties the game, but again, Andy Reid you usually see be more aggressive, especially late in the game when he needs to. Got the field goal, tied it up, obviously went on to win. Earlier in the game, had a 4th and 1 at his own 29. That one is a lot different. That's one the model typically likes, as we know, because it's a 1 yard. And you only need 1 yard. You've got Mahomes. That Chargers defense was looking pretty good on Thursday, but we'd like to see him go for that. You really can't fault them in their own territory early in the game, but still the numbers bear out that you're going to convert that more often than not. But the big one, I think, is that 4th and goal at the 1. And then Brandon Staley actually had one big one that he missed. 4th and 2 around midfield with a minute left in the second quarter, up 3. I thought this was more of a situational thing. Only a minute left, and they're up 3, and you give the ball back to Mahomes at midfield with a minute left. He can turn that into a touchdown pretty quickly. We've seen what he can do with less than a minute. But overall, it seemed like they weren't as aggressive as we would expect them to be in this game on Thursday night. Did you get that same feeling?
Well, they did go for it four times on fourth down by the end of the game, and they converted all four of them. Maybe those were all later opportunities. Maybe they weren't as aggressive early, and
They
you're
did have
behind
two of
on.
them early. One in the end of the first quarter at midfield on a 4th and 1, and then later in the at 4th and 1 from the 18. So you're right; they were pretty aggressive. He had the one big one,
Yeah.
but yeah, go on. Sorry.
Well, I the answer is I don't know. You kind of need to ask Brandon Staley what was going through his mind each one of these picks. Something he saw in the Kansas City defense that he didn't like, something that maybe he thought they were expecting, or didn't see any weaknesses they could exploit. And it is hard because when the other quarterback's Patrick Mahomes, you have to be afraid of what he can do with the ball in good field position, but also afraid of giving the ball back to him in the first place. So
Yeah.
it's a really tricky balancing act. And we can talk about one specific call here or there, but over the I don't want to get too overreact to the results of one game. I don't want to make a bigger deal out of it than it is. It's interesting, and we'll see if it continues. But when you play the Chiefs, you can't run your normal strategy. You need to change things up.
Yeah, and like you said, whether Mahomes punt the ball back to him, and he's inside his own 10-yard line, he's still dangerous. If you give him the ball at midfield, it's still dangerous. So totally agree. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't in that situation. But I'm kind of wondering, and this has come up internally, we've talked about it, if with Staley it has to do with some of the media pushback he got last year, not only in that Raiders game at the end of the year, but throughout the year, going for it in his own territory. Or Mike on Monday brought up a good point of just the Chargers overall have a better defense, and they looked really good up to that point. I think in 3 drives, the Chiefs punted twice and scored, had a touchdown, but the Chargers defense was playing very well.
That's also true. He made us trust his defense more than he trusted it last year. That if you're looking for a specific reason, that's better than anything else I can give you, because the Chargers defense has played pretty well through 2 games.
Yeah, and most of these guys, I would expect Staley the same way. Obviously, they listen to the media. Sometimes they come back at them on some of these questions. We saw Shanahan get a little upset on that question about Trey Lance, understandably. But I can't expect a guy like Staley would just give up his aggressiveness because the media said, "Oh, why did you do that? That was a bad decision." So yeah, I think the defense, like you said, I would agree that that's probably the best explanation. But it's only been 2 games, like to your point. So if as the season goes on, this could become more of a trend, and then we'll be kind of analyzing what he's doing and why he's doing things differently. But overall, we'll just have to wait and see there. Now, one guy we talked about last week, I think everyone in the world was talking about him. We said he would learn from his mistakes, Nathaniel Hackett, but he didn't. He made some big mistakes again this week.
He made different mistakes. I mentioned on the FO Data show on Tuesday that this here show, the Coaches Show, we should just rename it to "What Stupid Thing Will Nathaniel Hackett Do Next?" Because it's a contest. How will he look like a clown this week?
Yeah, this week he had a 4th and goal at the 1, 23 seconds left in the first half. This is, I think, the big one. They take a delay game, which has been a huge problem. This comes up later in the game as well, but to the point where the Broncos crowd was half supportively, I think half or more than half mockingly counting down the play clock so that they would know what it is like you would see opponents do in a basketball game, except counting down from 5 when there's really 15 seconds left. But they were doing it. They took a delay game and then kicked the field goal. This one is a little understandable or defensible, I guess, if you will. 23 seconds left. You don't have as much of that equity as if you fail your opponent's on the 1-yard line, you can get a safety. They're still, going to have to run a play or two at that point, and the Broncos could call timeouts to make them get out of the end zone. But it's not like you've got 10 minutes left and you've got a really good shot at a safety. But, I mean, I think we talked about this last week. You gave Russell Wilson a ton of money. You traded for him, gave him a bunch of money. And on several occasions, they didn't put the ball in his hands. And I'll let you talk about the big one, I think, is that 4th and 2 at the 36, taking the delay of game and then punting.
So I didn't see the first half here, so I don't know if this 4th and goal, the 1 delay game, I don't know if that was strategy or if they screwed up. I know they're screwing up a lot. I will say 4th and 6 is a lot different than 4th and goal on the 6 is a lot different than 4th and goal at the 1. Once you're at the 6, I'm kicking, and I'm pissed about it, but I'm kicking. But if that was a strategic choice they made to try and just run all the time off they had and kick the field goal, that's awful. That is absolutely awful. Now, the big one that you mentioned here, and I'll just do the intro. So it's late in the third quarter, 3.5 minutes left in the third quarter. Denver's got the ball, 4th and 2 at the Houston 36. I don't know the exact score here, but it was a close game. It was a one-score game either way.
I think they were down 3. It seems like the whole game they were down 3.
Pretty much, yeah. So it's 4th and 2. They're at the Houston 36-yard line. They take a delay a game and then punt. Last week on this show, we discussed their whole strategy. At the end of the game, they were going to beat the Seahawks by getting to the 46 and trying a field goal. That was the plan. That was the intent. That was the goal. Here they are 10 yards closer and in Denver, not in Seattle, and they turned down the field goal, choosing to punt. What's happening? What's going on? It's the kind of thing where if he made the same bad decision twice, at least you would know that he had a set of guidelines, a game plan, some kind of a mindset he was sticking to. But the flip and flopping from a terrible decision to kick a field goal to a terrible decision to punt, that is an indication that he has no idea what he's doing and is making this all up as he goes along. What happened there? What's going on in Denver?
Yeah, it's got a lot of questions to answer. And again, I said you would think he would have learned from his mistakes last week, didn't. But on this situation too, prior to that 4th down play, I think they actually were in field goal formation on the 4th and 2. Took ended up getting a delay game. I don't know. I don't think that was intentional either. They've just got some big time telling problems, clock watching problems. But on the 3rd down play, it was 3rd and 1, ran the ball with a tight end, Andrew Beck, on kind of an end around, and lost a yard in that situation.
But it was by design an option play. There was a player that Beck had to run like speed option to it. He had a pitch option. He ended up keeping the ball. But Andrew Beck is a 4th-year pro. He played 22 games in the past 2 years, in 2020 and 21. In those 22 games, he never touched the ball one time. And now Nathaniel Hackett is taking the ball out of Russell Wilson's hands, who, by the way, has run a lot of options in his career. Not as much recently as he's gotten older, but he's run the option a ton and knows how to pick up a yard. But we're not going to let him run the option. We're going to let Andrew Beck play the part of Tommy Frazier, I guess, running the option here. It didn't work.
Element of surprise, maybe he's going for. I don't know.
Maybe I don't know. I don't know what happened. I don't know what's going on. It's zany. It's the only thing I can say is that it's zany. And we talked. The biggest issue, frankly, it's not so much these individual decisions; it's just their complete inability to function as a football team. All the delay of game penalties. Last week they were criticized for not calling a timeout at the end of the game. This week, I guess to avoid that criticism, they burned through all their timeouts. They had no more timeouts left halfway through the 4th quarter because they were calling so many timeouts to avoid a delay of game and still getting a lot of delays of game. So here we are. We're 2 games into the season, and they still look like a team that is in the first quarter of a preseason contest. They're not ready for primetime yet. Now, all of that said, they still beat Houston.
Yeah.
All of that said, they should have beat Seattle except for some fumbles at the goal line. They should still be 2-0. So if, and this is a big giant if in blinking capital red neon letters, if they can get their act together, this could still be a good football team.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to your point, getting their act together, because the first 2 teams that they lost to and barely beat are 2 teams that are not expected to be very good. And they're obviously in that AFC West going to have some very tough games, still have 6 games against the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Chiefs to go. So they're definitely going to have to get it together. We're probably at this point going to have to make a permanent segment. Like you said, the title could just be, what is Nathaniel Hackett going to do dumb this week? We'll have a segment devoted just to him every week this year, I think.
It's looking that way. And to be frank, if he has a good game, we should still take a moment to credit him for fixing things.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens next week. We said it last week. Hopefully he learns from these mistakes going into next week. But the way it's looked these first couple weeks, not going to count on it, but we'll see. Now, there were some other coaches that made some bad decisions as well. We covered some of those bad or suboptimal decisions. I always hate to call them bad decisions because they're not bad in and of themselves, but suboptimal. We covered those. There's one that people may not have even noticed the game. They probably turned it off already. This was something I noticed on the Monday night game. We see this a lot in the NFL. It doesn't really make a huge difference whether you go for it or not here. But Kevin O'Connell, what we call kind of the surrender punt. I think there's the surrender punt index on Twitter, the account that runs. 4th and 22 at their own 37. Kirk Cousins just got sacked on a 3rd and 13 or something, 3rd and 12. But there's only 8:20 left in the game. They're down 17. They need to score 3 times to win the game. Not likely, but it can't really happen if you punt the ball. I mean, you can score on defense. You can get – and they end up getting an interception. But you don't get credit for losing by less in the NFL. And I think we see this fairly often, and it's just kind of mind-blowing that you would see a team at the highest level just say, all right, we're not even going to try to get 22 yards and try and keep a comeback or get a comeback going.
Yeah, I think maybe the sack on 3rd down may have played a lot to do with that decision. Like, let's keep my quarterback healthy because if we don't have Cousins, we're not winning anything, and we're probably not winning this game either. I'm not gonna jump on a guy for punting on a game who's down by 17 points, and the stranger things have happened. There have been more miraculous comebacks, as we'll talk to when we get to Miami, actually, but.
And the Jets.
The odds were slim. The odds were slim. Let's escape with our quarterback healthy, live to fight another day. And like you say, it's not the reason they lost the game. He could have, and if he had gone for it in 4th and 22, no one would have cared either. Maybe they would have lost 31-7. It's not a giant issue. Maybe Justin Jefferson makes a big play and they do a miracle rally. But yes, if his goal was to win this particular football game, he absolutely should have gone for it on 4th down there. But it's only week 2. There's 17 weeks to go. Let's cut our losses. Do some damage control here. Like you say, it doesn't matter if you lose by 17 or lose by 24, whatever it is. So, he made the worst of a bad situation, but I'm not going to tear him apart for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, help with the quarterback. We've seen anything can happen on a play. Again, bringing up Trey Lance, a pretty common play. And things can happen. And like you said, your chances of winning aren't very high. You hate to see a pro team essentially give up. But yeah, you make a ton of valid points. It's another thing. Their win probability is like 0.1% at that point anyway. So you said making the worst of a bad situation, but totally agree. Long season. First year coach too. Nothing as drastic as we've seen from Nathaniel Hackett. So nothing really crazy. Another thing I mentioned just there kind of when we were talking the Jets, that comeback, I didn't have this here in my notes, but it reminded me of kind of something that people have been talking about a lot this week is Nick Chubb's decision not to go down when he goes in to score that touchdown. We saw him do exactly that, I think, 2 years ago.
Against Houston, he had a wide open touchdown and ran out of bounds at the 2 so they can kneel out the clock.
Yeah, and on one hand, I've seen both arguments against it. From my perspective, having been here for a few years, and what we look at is looking at the numbers. If you go down, you take a knee. I think it would have been the 2-minute warning. The Jets had no timeouts. There's 100% chance you win that game. I was barring something crazy on a kneel down, but you win that game. And people defending it, hey, you give your defense a 14-point lead. You should be or 13-point lead with less than 2 minutes left. The defense should make stops. There were some blown coverages, some bad things that happened. Some bad just defensive strategy, it looked like. But at the same time, when you've got a chance to get your win probability, get your chance of winning to 100% where the other team doesn't even get the ball, doesn't even get that chance, you've got to make that. And we said, Chubb has done that before. And I think we would have liked to see it, but at the same time, Cleveland definitely should have won that game. There's no reason they should have lost.
No, I mean, the numbers are very obvious, and even most Madden players can do the math on this. And if he goes down, they automatically win the game. And if he scores, you're just playing for fantasy points. And is it Nick Chubb's fault that Cleveland lost? No, it is not. It's the defense and the special teams that allowed the onside kick recovery.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those things. He has done it before. We've seen players do it before, but telling a pro athlete who is that competitive, don't try to score in the heat of the moment, that's a really, really hard thing to do. And especially because they were already ahead. You made it, give them a 2-score lead. If it would be much harsher if the game had been tied, for example, or they'd only been up by 1 and he scored. That was the Todd Gurley situation with the Falcons a year or two ago.
Yeah, just
he literally accidentally scored a touchdown. He was trying to go down. The defense dragged him into the end zone so he could get the ball back. And that would be a more severe situation, because that's the one where you're preaching, game awareness, clock awareness, field position management. This is one where we're already ahead. Let's just ice this thing. So he scored. The defense screwed up. The special team screwed up. It happens. It would have been better if he had gone down, but it's not Nick Chubb's fault that Cleveland lost that game.
100% agree. Defense, special teams definitely had a shot to win it. That's all you can do as an offense, is set your defense up, give them a lead to protect, and Cleveland just could not do it. It might be the curse of Brownie the Elf. I don't know. We'll see coming in Thursday night. I think that's at Cleveland, isn't it?
Steelers and Browns is the game.
Yeah, I believe they're in Cleveland, so hopefully they can come back from that and do a little bit better. Yeah, at Cleveland on Thursday. So hopefully it's not a curse. We will see. But just one more day until we find out. So going on to the positive side, like we like to do as well, we do give credit where credit is due. We're not all bad when it comes to these fourth down decisions. Cliff Kingsbury had a good decision, one that we don't see a lot. Andy Reid had one of these, a similar one in overtime a couple years ago. The Cardinals had 4th and 1 at the Vegas 37 on the first possession of overtime after Kyler Murray basically willed them to tie this game and scrambled around all over the place, what seemed like hours on Sunday afternoon. But have a chance to kick a long field goal. Matt Prater, we know, can make those field goals. It would have been about a 55-yarder there. But Vegas can still win with a touchdown. Yeah, you take a lead, they can also kick a field goal, tie it. This one could end in a tie. The offense did struggle most of the game, but the way Murray played lately and just in general, should be expecting him to pick up 1 yard. They went deep. Actually had a great play to Hollywood Brown, and then Duron Harmon came in with a great play, hard hit on Brown that knocked the ball loose. Didn't pay off, but I think the process here is a very good one for him to go for it there.
Yeah, this is something you see situations like this more often near the end of regulation, but if there's like 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter and it's 4th and short and you kick a field goal to tie the game, that's a terrible situation to be in. Kicking off with a tie score late in the game is an awful situation to be in, because the other team now has a chance to run the clock and kick a field goal to beat you with the gun. And this is a similar one. It's in overtime, so it's not quite the same, but it's the same idea. The field goal here, first of all, it's a long field goal. There's a reasonable chance we miss it, maybe 30%, maybe 40%. You can do the math on that, but it's certainly not 10.
Yeah.
And there's a reasonable chance we miss the field goal. And if we hit it, we don't necessarily win anyway. In fact, like you say, there's a good chance this Vegas offense takes the ball, gets a touchdown, and beats us without us ever seeing the ball again. And I know the Raiders not played well in the second half, but they rattled off that 20-0 lead really easy, and they could come back, turn it back on just as fast. So here's one where aggression's the way to go. You really want to, in overtime, you want to get a touchdown on that first drive. You don't want to get a field goal and then give the other team a chance to beat you again. You just let's take care of business. Let's get this done now and hit the showers with a victory. That's the plan. And 4th and 1, had Murray drop back. I'm sure that a scramble lane had opened. That was probably his first read, honestly. Was, is there a way I can scurry and get these 3 feet and have us keep the ball? Wasn't there. He tried the deep pass. The deep pass was almost there. A great play by the Raiders to break it up. That's the way it goes. But no, again, Kingsbury made the right decision on that one.
Yep, and he's been really good the last couple of years and been good to that point this year. So not surprising to see that from him, and expect to see that moving forward. And the Cardinals did end up winning the game. The defense made a play, picked up the fumble, and won that game in the end. So good process, bad result, but then good result in the end.
Yeah, it's actually funny. He's always high in our 4th down aggression rankings, but that's usually because he likes to go for it on 4th and medium in near midfield, out of field goal range. He had, I forget it was last year or the year before, but he had the 2 worst decisions on 4th downs where he chose to kick short field goals on 4th and 1. So the field goal bug has been a problem for him. He knows to avoid the short punt and try to keep possession there. That's a good thing. But he's had a tendency before to kick these field goals in 4th and short situations, and good for him for trying it here, even though it didn't work out.
Yeah, and I think those field goals you're referencing, I think it was 2020, if I recall. One was against Miami, and I think it was a situation where they tied it up late. Miami came down and kicked a field goal to win it. And then the other, they were within 3 weeks of each other. It was like 1 week he made one, the next week was okay, and then the following week it was another bad decision. So 2 of those somewhat late in the later third of the season, I think. And that was bad. He's come back from that for the most part, but yeah, he's definitely got a tendency to do that. And then moving on to another coach who has a tendency to go for it. We know Doug Peterson, we remember from Philadelphia in their Super Bowl season, was phenomenal going forward on fourth down, just very aggressive. He had one his first year here in Jacksonville, 4th and 3 at the Indy 47 was the first drive of their first drive of the game after intercepting Matt Ryan. Got 8 yards, went on to score a touchdown. The big one for me, and this was Mike Tanier's his pick for best decision that we talked about on Monday, was the 4th and 1 at the Colts 5. They're already up 17. It's the end of the third quarter. Instead of taking the easy points for a field goal, at that point you're in the closer than a field goal or than an extra point, so in the 95% range to make that. But chose to go for it because a field goal, even though they're pretty much guaranteed points or very close to guaranteed, it makes a 3-score game a 3-score game. You go from 17 to 20, whereas they scored the touchdown on this play, went up 24-0, and really never looked back.
Yeah, it's kicking the field goal there. It's the bigger lead, but it's the same idea as you don't want to kick a field goal when you're up 3 points late, because now you turn a 1-score lead into a 1-score lead, and you have forced the other team to go for a touchdown, which will beat you. You've taken the option to go for the tie off the table. You're forcing them to try and beat you. That's bad. Obviously, a 17-point lead is safer than a 3-point lead, but it's the same idea. And it's 4th and 1. You're rolling at that point. Let's hammer this nail in the coffin. Like I said, let's win this game now and hit the showers. Take the last, what would it be, 17 minutes off, whatever it was. And it worked out. And it turns out they probably didn't need to because the Colts looked like garbage. But they didn't give the Colts a chance to rally. They didn't give the Colts a chance to get their act together. They kept the pressure on. And they had a 4th down on the first drive, too. When the game was, I think it was first drive, but it was in the first quarter. It was close. They had
their first drive,
yeah, they had 4th down near midfield, and it's right here. Yeah, 4th and 3 at the Indy 47, and let's get this lead. Playing with leads is great, and they get the 4th down there, go on to score. It wasn't a great, overwhelming day for the Jacksonville offense. It was the defense was smothering them, but those 2 plays gave that's 14 points that's on the scoreboard that they don't get if they punt. So they were aggressive and it worked out.
Yeah, and that one at the end of the game or the end of the third quarter is kind of the opposite of the Minnesota one, where in this situation the Jaguars are going to win, 9 times out of 10 at this point. They were over 90% win probability, but takes the more aggressive decision, the one that gets them even higher in win probability, and it paid off and they won the game. Like I said, Colts not looking very good. We'll get to Frank Reich momentarily, talk about him more specifically. But yeah, Jacksonville, Doug Peterson continuing his aggressive ways, which you really like to see, but even, with a new team, Trevor Lawrence, they're kind of getting a reset almost from last year. And that offense, they're looking pretty good. Jacksonville, I think, is top 10 in DVOA. Is that right? Through 2 games?
I want to say that's right. I think Lawrence was the second or third quarterback this week. But, we talked about it last week. They should have beat Washington in week 1. They were kind of the like the Broncos. They screwed up in the red zone. Travis Etienne dropped a touchdown pass. There was I think they kicked a short field goal, but they probably played better than Washington in week 1 and should have won that game. They blew out the Colts here. It didn't look like they belonged on the same field. So the Jaguars are good. And I'll toot my own horn a little bit. We did our staff predictions right before the season started. Which team do you think is going to most likely to beat the DVOA projection? And I took the Jaguars. Then the biggest reason is addition by subtraction. They fired the worst NFL coach any of us has ever seen, and they hired a guy who's more than semi-competent. That's a huge improvement. And so far, that's been good for me.
Yep, absolutely good start to the season for the Jaguars. And you mentioned Urban Meyer gone from there. He was on the hot seat, a few weeks into the season last year. It's kind of tough sometimes to say a coach is on the hot seat in week 3. And we've got a few coaches that I want to talk about. One of these 3 is definitely not like the other. I'll start with him first, and that's Matt Rule. They're in Carolina. He was 25th in our coach rankings 30th in 2020, his first year in Carolina, was second to last in 4th down decision-making. The team overall was 19th in EPI, which is on-field performance. They weren't terrible, close to average. Last year, improved to 25th in our coach rankings, 12th in CCI. He was much more aggressive last year, but 32nd in EPI. We know how bad they were, especially after that, I think, a 3-0 start. He's last in net win probability gained in week 2 this year. I don't really think it's any shock or any surprise to say, or even too far to say that Matt Rule is already on the hot seat. Would you?
Matt Rule's been on the hot seat for at least a year. The only question is how hot the seat is. I talked about those staff predictions. I picked the Carolina Panthers to get the first overall draft pick in 2020. I picked the Carolina Panthers to get the top overall draft pick in 2021. I was wrong both years, but I was all set to pick them for a third year in a row in 2022. And then they traded for Baker Mayfield, and I changed my mind, and I picked the New York Giants instead. So, of course, the Giants beat the Panthers and are 2-0, and this is probably the year the Panthers are going to get the first overall draft pick. And I'm mad at them for that, for doing worse than they're making me angry for having a little faith in them.
Yep.
But when you acquire your starting quarterback, not in February or March or April, it was June maybe when the trade was finalized. You're well
July
into
6th,
training.
I think it was.
What's this?
July 6th, just after the 4th
6th.
of July. Yep.
You're well into your off-season program. You've been wasting now months of prep on the guys you had who needed replacing. Then you spend a couple of weeks toying around with the idea that, it's a competition, when it's not. It was never a competition. There was no chance that Baker Mayfield was going to be a worse quarterback than Sam Darnold. If you've watched Darnold play, I don't know, ever. So they wasted time with that. So they're another team that, like Denver, they're still a lot of the time. It looks like they're ready for their preseason opener, but we're 2 weeks into the season now, and Denver has the excuse of this. As a first-time head coach, a lot of new pieces in place. Carolina is here by choice, man. They had their whole off season to do this. They just sat around twiddling their thumbs, and they do the Mayfield trade late, and there's not a lot of other significant changes. It's the same guys they've had in place. They know it's going to happen. They're here almost by design, and it's sad and depressing. The question is not how hot is his seat. The question is, does he survive the season? Do you think he'll make it to Thanksgiving at this point? And I don't know the answer to those questions. I'm not really sure, exactly. There's some teams that, there's no point in firing him before the end of the season because you're not going to hire a guy before that anyway. So you may as well let him play out the string. But I don't know, man. I don't see any way he can be back coaching the Panthers in 2023. I don't see any way that's possible.
Yeah, I forget who it was that tweeted it, but saying this next stretch, he might not even make it to week 8 because they've got the Saints, the Cardinals, the 49ers. They go to LA to face the Rams, and they come back home to face the Buccaneers.
Okay, so we're 0-7. We're 0-7.
So if they go 0-7, start 0-7, and do not look any better than what they've looked, he may be gone before we even get halfway through the season. And I forget who it was. I can't keep track of all the different writers and who writes what chapters in the Almanac. But in this chapter, they referenced the quote from Rule last year saying, hey, it took Jay-Z like 7 years to get famous or to make it. He's not going to make it half that. I don't think so. He doesn't have that leverage or that leniency or that patience from the organization, I don't think.
No, so I don't think telling the fan base we have a 9-year rebuilding plan is a way to build confidence and build job security.
Yeah, and they really didn't do, again from the Almanac, didn't do that badly in the offseason. They made some, before Baker Mayfield even, they made some good draft picks. They did some good things, but it wasn't the moves you would think a rebuilding team would need to make, and that they never really bought into the fact that, hey, they're in a rebuild, they need to. They don't really have the team or coach to compete, I think.
It's almost like they figure as long as Tom Brady is still playing like Tom Brady, we may as well just wait.
Yeah.
and not even try until the Bucs have to make a move for quarterback, and then the division will be ours.
Yeah, give Mayfield a shot, maybe get that number 1 pick, get a quarterback, and then maybe Brady will retire for real this year, and they'll be able to compete. But yeah, things not looking good for Matt Rule right now. Again, long season though, they could still end up winning some games. Especially, you said Baker Mayfield isn't going to be as bad as Darnold, but it doesn't look great so far. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on. This next one may be a little surprising. Frank Reich, we just talked about him a moment ago. He was second in our head coach rankings last year, fourth in 2020. He's been first and second in the fourth down decision making the last couple of years. The team has been good, but this weekend I've got a couple really close friends who are Colts fans that are not happy. Most Colts fans aren't not really happy with Frank Reich. And I think at one point, it may just be because I'm here. I live in Southern Indiana, maybe because of my geographic location on Twitter. But Fire Frank was on there as a trending either hashtag or just the two words people were typing out there. I'm not so sure he's on the hot seat, but it's not been a good start for him.
No, Gail Clinton wrote about this in Film Room. I think it just went up today, actually, or yesterday. But talking about Jacksonville's upset over Indianapolis and how mostly what it meant for the Colts and how they've kind of had this system really since Andrew Luck retired, where we've got our team, we'll do a rent a quarterback for a year and contend, and we'll probably replace that quarterback the next season. And it's generally worked for them. They've been, I don't think they've been playoffs every year, but they've been a good team over the past half decade plus. So it's been working for them, but they have been terrible in 2 games in 2022. They've looked this up. Their first game went to overtime, so they've really played 9 quarters this year. In those 9 quarters, they scored 17 points once, and they scored 3 points once, and they were shut out the other 7 times. So it's been brutally bad for the most of the year. And that's against Houston and Jacksonville, who I know I'm high on Jacksonville, but it's not like they're getting run by Baltimore or Miami or Buffalo or Philadelphia.
The defenses aren't great. I think we're higher on the Jacksonville offense than the defense, if I'm not mistaken.
Probably, yeah, but the Jacksonville secondary still got some issues. But these are bad teams that are making the Colts look foolish. And it may be time for a blow up, and that obviously would mean Matt Ryan won't return, and he's playing his way out of a job too. But if what do you do when you blow things up? Well, the first thing you usually do is fire the head coach and get a new face in there and just try something new, even if it's just change for the sake of change. But when you're as bad as this Colts team has looked so far this year, you need change for the sake of change.
Yeah, and they're in the division that really is probably, or the consensus would agree, is the weakest division. Not really expected having. Tennessee was the 1 seed last year. I know they mentioned that a ton on Monday night, and people talking about that Bills game. That's not a 1 seed Titans team. They were the worst 1 seed last year in DVOA history. I think would have even been the worst 2 seed. Really had a shot, with the defense that's been pretty good over the years, pretty good offensive line. It's not what it was. They've got some guys that are coming back from injury. But it looked like Matt Ryan was all they needed, just a stable presence at quarterback, and he has not been able to come through yet. To be fair, too, they were missing Michael Pittman was out this past weekend, as well as Alec Pierce, who hadn't really looked great the first week. He dropped a touchdown in the end zone. We're kind of thin at receiver, but still that's a game, they should win with Matt Ryan and the rest of that team. So I completely agree with you that. And Jimmy, it's not like Jimmy Garoppolo is available anymore. There were talks about, who he would get traded to at some point when a quarterback, a team needed a quarterback. He's not an option anymore. So they have to stick with Matt Ryan at this point. It seems like I don't think he can be benched. I think Ellinger is their backup from Texas.
I think you're right. And no, he's not a guy.
Yeah,
he's not a guy you want to turn to unless you're waving the white flag, which they might do.
Late in the season, if they're out of it, if they keep playing like this, he may get a shot.
Even with those missing receivers, as you noted, but he'll point out in film, there were throws there to be made, and Matt Ryan was not making them. They got problems up and down this roster all of a sudden. It's gone dark quickly.
Yeah, not looking good at Indianapolis. Someplace it wasn't looking good for a while on Sunday, and then turned it on. We talked about Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. I don't necessarily think he's on the hot seat either. He's been top 10 in our coach rankings the last couple of years. As we mentioned, he's finished highly in our aggressiveness rankings, has had some short field goal moments, especially a few inside the 10. I think in his first year, just a couple years ago, had multiple of those. He's number 1 in net win probability gained this season, though, and he was this week. But we've seen the way that offense has really faltered down the stretch. And this year, we're absolutely terrible against the Chiefs. And then just this past week for 3 quarters were awful. And then Kyler Murray made things happen. And and they took it to overtime. But Kingsbury, there have been a lot of criticisms of him in his, what it's been 3 or 4 years that he's been there. Do you think he's a guy that if things don't turn around, or they kind of turned around, they got the win this week. They're only 1-1, but is he at risk of losing his job and being out in Arizona this year, you think?
It's a really tricky situation. I have a weird, almost a blind spot for Arizona, in that they usually play well in the first half of the year and bad in the second half of the year. And I must just watch them more in the second half of the year, because I feel like every time I watch them, I think this team is mostly not good. They have some highlights and some fluke plays here and there. And it's fun to watch Kyler scramble around and make guys, make defenders look silly, and that's all fun. But he also makes a lot of really bad mistakes. And I was screaming at the Raiders at the end of this game to blitz him. They weren't getting any pressure. He had, I think it was the 2-point conversion where it took him 28 seconds and more than 80 yards of actual distance covered to gain 2 yards and 2 points. The funniest 2-point conversion I've ever seen. But the Raiders were playing that with a 2-man rush and a defensive tackle playing spy. And you saw how well that worked out. And you can't do that. You can blitz him and make him make mistakes. And the Raiders refuse to. And I think it's because they don't have faith in their corners, honestly. But that's the topic for another day. I'm looking for it now. There was a comment on Discord that Aaron Schatz made, something about a huge mistake the Cardinals have made in this game. And he's like, how could the Cardinals have made the mistake? And I asked, have you ever watched the Arizona Cardinals play football? They make terrible mistakes all the time. And sometimes they overcome those mistakes. And sometimes, like we saw in the playoffs last year, they don't. So it's interesting. If they win 9 or 10 games, sneak into the playoffs and lose in the wild card round again, do they keep him? Probably. And they did just sign him to a huge extension as well. So he probably have to go like 4 and what would that be? 4-13 to lose his job or something. Lose a game to Seattle, that might do it. So it would take a really bad year for him to lose his job. But it's some of the same things we've seen. It's been years now, and he's still running a very rudimentary, very simple offense. No team runs a less diversified route tree. They don't throw any ins. They don't throw any drags. Anything in the middle of the field is just off the table, and that may be a function of Murray's height. I don't really know, but it's been 2 years in a row now that when we do the DVOA by routes article, and the Cardinals just missing from some of these data points. There's not there. It's all no. Don't do any motion. Don't do anything that might tip the defense's hand or give the offense any kind of break. Never do any motion. Just spread the field. Somewhere, if you spread it, a curl route will open for a 7-yard gain. Just hit that curl over and over again, and we'll throw in lots and lots of wide receiver screens, even though they're bad plays. And hey, it's 3rd and 12. Kyler, save our bacon. And Kyler says, okay, and he saves their bacon, and they move on. So it's a weird situation, and I guess there's a lot to be determined here. I don't think it's likely unless, like I say, they completely elapse, and we're talking a top 5 draft pick team.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned it, signed him to the extension. Kyler Murray obviously got his extension. They came in together there and want to keep them together. And something, too, that we could see they struggle in the beginning of the year. And how many times have we seen a team do that and then the back half of the year come on strong, make the playoffs or make a push for the playoffs, and that recency bias, they were playing really well into the year, whether it was, some great plays, by the players, not necessarily the coaching, overcoming their coaching, or the coach does kind of do something really good at the end and they keep their job. Like I think Dan Quinn a few years ago, the Falcons kind of went on a run the back half of the season, and he was there for another year and then got fired, I think, the middle of the next season.
Okay. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, though, because I forgot about this. The mistake that Aaron Schatz was referring to on a game-tying 2-point try, the Cardinals had to delay a game because they weren't prepared to run the 2-pointer that they knew they were going to run down 8 at the end of the game, right? I think it was the last play of the game, in fact. But there's the end of the game. They took a delay a game. And I asked, have you ever watched a Cardinals game? Because this is the kind of mistakes they make all the time. But they make these mistakes, and then Kyler Murray bails them out, like he did on against the Raiders. It happens all the time. There's no team that succeeds in spite of themselves like Arizona, and that's the way it's been. But as long as they keep succeeding, his job's probably safe.
Yeah, and you mentioned Kyler Murray scrambling around on that play. It reminds me of a friend. I mentioned this to Mike too on Monday. A friend shared a tweet that said it was Kyler Murray scrambling. Reminds me of a toddler that steals your iPhone and runs around. It's like, and I'll never be able to unsee that. And it is. He kind of like those quick motions, just kind of running all over the place, looking like you don't even know where he's going, but makes it work.
He scampers. He's itty bitty, obviously, that goes without saying. But he also, I don't know if maybe they don't make helmets in his size, but his helmet looks like too big for him, right? So this is borrowed his older brother's helmet. So this little fellow with a great big head just running around, and he's I don't know if he's the fastest quarterback in the league, but I know he takes more steps per yard than any other player. His feet are just a blur, right? And and the defenders are falling down all over themselves. It's great comedy even when it works. It's very fun to watch. He shouldn't be able to do a lot of the things he does, but he does because he's Kyler Murray.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Discord. I just want to take a moment to remind everyone we do have a Football Outsiders Discord, and we're live tweet or live Discording the games on Sundays, Monday night, Thursday night. That is available. And you can also get some really good articles, premium stats, betting picks on the Football Outsiders website with an FO Plus subscription. You also get an ad-free experience when you sign up for FO Plus. That's at footballoutsiders.com/subscribe. So don't forget about that. And the FO Discord has a lot of good conversation going on during those games. Now we're going to move on.
Oh, just before we do real quick, I'm kind of repeating myself here, but about how the Cardinals sort of succeed in spite of themselves and how they rely on Kyler Murray. Nathaniel Hackett's team takes a delay a game in a critical situation, and we're calling for him to be burned at the stake. Yep. Cliff Kingsbury's team makes a delay of game in a critical situation, and we all forget about it because Kyler Murray.
Nobody bats an eye like the memes. And part of it, I guess, maybe because he made it work. Denver won the second game, but
Kyler Murray covers a lot of Kingsbury's mistakes.
Yeah, and it's not the first time we've seen a team with a quarterback or a players covering the mistakes of the coaches, but a lot to be proven there still in Arizona, even with last year's playoff berth. We'll move on now to our previews. We want to talk about the biggest game of the week, I think there's no question, is Buffalo at Miami. Maybe didn't seem this way coming into the season. Expected Buffalo to be good, but Miami, man, looked bad for three quarters. Maybe not bad, but did not look great for three quarters. Down 21 points, and then go on this crazy comeback, win the game. 6 touchdowns from Tua. What are you expecting in this game between these two teams? We've got Sean McDermott. Drawing a blank on the name. We got Sean McDermott, who's been there in Buffalo for a few years, consistently finishes well in our coach rankings. Top 5 the last 2 years. Top 10 in fourth down aggressiveness. He's third in net win probability game through 2 weeks. Had a couple really good calls this past week. Miami, Mike McDaniel, on the other hand, we don't know. He's a first-year coach. I guess kind of stumbled over my words there, but he's been really good. He had a questionable punt last week, 4th and 4 from midfield. It's a mid-range punt, not a big deal, but did have 2 really good calls in his own territory. 4th and 1 at his own 34 when they were down 7, and then at his own 45, down 14, went for it, converted both. So really gutsy calls from first-year coaches. What are you looking for as far as strategy and maybe how these two teams try and play each other this week?
Well, beyond just, I think Buffalo is a better team than Miami still, and I like Miami, but I think Buffalo is still, the head and shoulders above 31 other teams right now.
Absolutely.
But I think it's a really, really bad matchup for the Dolphins, especially based on what happened in last week. I think the game was in Baltimore, but the Dolphins fell behind because they gave up big plays in the passing game and a long run to a quarterback. And Josh Allen makes big plays in the passing game. And he's probably not quite as fast as Lamar Jackson, but he's capable of making big runs by himself. And probably doesn't run as much as he did as a rookie in his first early years. But when they need him to run, man, he's scary. He's big and athletic and fast, and he's way more physical than Lamar Jackson. He can run you over as well. So the Bills look like a team that can beat the Dolphins the same way the Dolphins got beat last week. And this is the real key point. How did the Dolphins make their comeback? By chucking the ball deep to Tyreek Hill. And even though the passes kind of hung in the air and they were underthrown, it didn't matter because you can underthrow a guy by 2 yards when he's 5 yards behind everybody else. If you're going to try deep balls against Buffalo, oh, you're in trouble, man. You're going to have a long, long day because everyone pays so much attention to Josh Allen. They didn't notice last year how great this Buffalo defense was and got them to the playoffs. The best defense by DVOA against deep passes we have ever measured. When we got that by direction, go back to the mid '90s at least, and there's never been a defense that excelled against the deep ball like this team did. And it's only 2 weeks, but they're number one against the deep ball again. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, and I think they've actually been injured for part of this, but they're this Buffalo secondary and the pass rush with Von Miller, you do not have a chance to hit this deep ball accurately. Number one in DVOA against the deep ball, and that's in 2 games against Tennessee, which is kind of all right. And Tannehill's been good for a while, but the receivers are old in Robert Woods and unproven in Treylon Burks. But week 1 was Matthew Stafford and the Rams, and that team won a Super Bowl by throwing deep over and over again. So this Bills secondary, you're not going to – Tyreek Hill is not going to have a day like he had against Baltimore. It's a totally different animal.
White, you mentioned, got some injuries there. He's not even back yet.
He's not back yet. They'll be better when he gets back. So they're going to have to – honestly, and this is going to sound maybe weird coming from a Football Outsiders guy, but they're going to have to get their running game going and win with a balanced, patient attack, because – trying to throw bombs against this Buffalo defense is asking for trouble. And unfortunately, Buffalo, we have number 2 against the pass and number 3 against the run by DVOA. So there's not really a good solution. But of the 2, you're probably going to have better luck running the ball as often as you can and trying to make that work. So, like I say, it's just a bad matchup for Miami. I was high on them coming into the year. I almost picked them ahead of Jacksonville for my team to be the DVOA projection, and they'll probably they'll be a playoff contender, I'm sure, for 18 weeks. We'll see if they actually get into the field. It's gonna be crowded in the AFC, which looks like a way better conference, especially the top right now. But this week, I do not like their odds. I don't like the chances very much at all.
Yeah, Buffalo is just a scary team. I went against taking them in our Super Bowl predictions at the beginning of the year. Ended up taking the Chargers in the AFC, just not completely just to be contrarian, but we've seen the best team doesn't always make it, or a lot of times doesn't. It's a long season, but they are looking right now. They're making me look dumb for that pick, I think, because they are just, like you said, head and shoulders above 31 other teams. It is a long season, but you mentioned that run game from Miami, and it's going to be tough. As you mentioned, Buffalo's been good against the run. They held the Rams to less than 3 yards per carry, held Tennessee to 3 yards per carry. Derrick Henry had 13 carries for 25 yards, and he did get a touchdown there on the goal line. I think a lot of us, or most of us, Football Outsiders, and a lot of people in the industry in general, did not expect a big year from Derrick Henry. Maybe he'd get the volume, but efficiency-wise, he was already was a lot less efficient last year in the first half of the season before he got hurt than he was the year past. But holding him like that after he went off against them last year, had like 130-something yards and 3 touchdowns. It's going to be tough for Miami to get anything going. Like you said, they're going to have to go with a balanced attack, and it's going to be tough when you're playing a defense that's really good at just about everything. Yeah,
and you look at the other side of the ball. Miami's defense through 2 games, we got them top 10 and against the run, but next to last against the pass. And Buffalo's a team beyond just being good. Sean McDermott's if a team wants to just take away the run and let Josh Allen beat them, he'll call a dozen passes in a row. He doesn't care. He's not gonna. He's no slave to the ground game. This is not a Pete Carroll or a Buddy Ryan. If you're going to give him the pass, he's going to take the pass and beat your ass. And that's what Buffalo is poised to do here against Miami.
Yeah, I think could end up being a better get. Like I said, the most anticipated matchup, I think, from what we've seen from Miami so far. Could be a little bit closer race in that division than a lot of people thought it would be. You mentioned you were high on Miami coming in this year, maybe expected to be closer than what a lot of people think, but they've looked like they can compete so far, at least. It didn't necessarily have a great game in week 1, but won that game, and then the big comeback showed their potential, I think, yesterday against a good Baltimore team that's favored or expected to win that division near the top of our preseason DVOA ranking. So it'll be big. I would expect both of these coaches, I mentioned how they've been pretty good 4th down, aggressive-wise, taking advantage of those decisions to do the same. We saw McDermott in the big game against New England last year, had like 4 or 5 4th downs. They went for it, got touchdowns on 2 of the 4 drives or 3 of the 4 drives. So expect him to take advantage of those situations and maximize the opportunities. We've seen from McDaniel so far that he's likely to do the same as well in a big matchup there.
Yeah, McDaniel's he's so fascinating because just personality-wise, he's unlike any coach I can remember seeing in the NFL. There's a few only a limited number of personality types you've seen. You get the guys who are just seem angry all the time, like Bill Belichick. You got the guys who are cheerleaders, like a Pete Carroll or a Dan Campbell. You got guys who are sort of father figures, like an Andy Reid, maybe. And I don't remember ever seeing a guy like Mike McDaniel who just comes off like, and I say this with love and brotherhood, like a complete nerd. Like
I was expecting the word to come out of your mouth. If you didn't say it, I was going to, because that's what it looks like.
And he seems to be really, really good at coaching football, but I hope someday I have a chance to sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons with him. I think that'd be awesome.
The people's man, the
nerd man.
But yeah, the first time, when he seeing him, giving his press conference and stuff, he almost looks like I had a teacher in high school who looked like he was a student, just that guy almost looks like he's a high school or college student just coming in.
He's still only 37. He's still 8 years younger than Tom Brady. I'm trying to remember what instrument he plays. Things like the not the trombone, but the flugelhorn or something.
He does it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big matchup to look forward to. Then we each, like we did last week, if you were with us, picked our own matchup that we're looking forward to coaching-wise. Vince, I will let you go with yours. I'll let you lead off first. Which game are you looking at coaching-wise, and what are you thinking in your pick there?
I am tempted to just make this the Nathaniel Hackett show and say I'm going to tune into this floating barge fire every week until it stops being entertaining. And to be honest, that's also an interesting matchup the other way. It's Denver and San Francisco on a Sunday night, which means it's Kyle Shanahan versus Russell Wilson again. And Kyle Shanahan's record against Russell Wilson is bad. It's something like 4-17, something along those lines. So that's interesting to see how that changes now that Wilson's on a new team. But I'm going to go a different way. More important game and a more interesting game featuring one coach we've talked a lot about today. The Los Angeles Rams and the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday afternoon. Sean McVay at Cliff Kingsbury. Both teams are 1-1, like most teams are in the NFL right now. It's a very even league at this point. But a four-way tie in the NFC West, and the winner gets a leg up. First win in the division for anybody in the NFC West. And it's funny because each team lost badly in week one. The Rams got boat raced by the Bills, and the Cardinals got just plucked in the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs. And then they had sort of opposite games in week two. The Rams built up a big lead against Atlanta and then nearly blew it, whereas the Cards fell behind by a giant margin and then rallied to win. So both teams have a lot of question marks. Both have a lot to prove. And it'll be, how does Sean McVay go about defending Kyler Murray? Does he try to blitz him like I've said most teams should do, because you can force him into making mistakes? But most teams don't have Aaron Donald. And so does he just sit back, let Donald wreak havoc in the middle of the field, make Murray uncomfortable from there, and count on Jalen Ramsey and company to shut down this crew of Arizona receivers? And frankly, both the Rams cornerbacks and the Cardinals receivers, neither of those units has looked very good this year. So that's kind of a weakness on weakness matchup for through two games. And then Arizona is just always a question mark, but always fun to watch. How are they going to try to contain Matthew Stafford? They blitzed Patrick Mahomes like crazy. Honestly, I'm not sure if how they fared against or how they chose to play Derek Carr last week in the Raiders. I'm not sure how much they blitzed, but blitzing Matthew Stafford is a lot like blitzing Patrick Mahomes. He'll burn you. He had an even better DVOA against the blitz than Mahomes did last year, and he was a very average quarterback against zone coverage. So the Cardinals have been an aggressive defense this year, and it has burned them. And if they're aggressive again on Sunday, it will probably burn them again.
Yeah, that will be a fun one to watch. To division opponents, those games seem like they're always good matchups. I was kind of put this, I mentioned it to you about Baltimore, New England, maybe being a big matchup. We have two of the best coaches in the game right now. But I went another way, too, and went Detroit and Minnesota. Maybe kind of a surprising pick there, but Detroit, Dan Campbell's team is top 10 in DVOA through 2 weeks, I believe. Yeah. No opponent adjustments yet, but we saw them play very hard last year. They play for him And they're, looking decent so far. Had the big comeback, almost beat Philadelphia. This week got up big on Washington early. Let them come back a little bit, but I don't think they were ever really in danger of losing. It didn't seem like watching that one. Minnesota obviously coming off that disappointing loss to Philadelphia in week 2 just on Monday night. And as far as the fourth down aggressiveness going, that's kind of where I come from. Obviously, being on the edge sports side for so many years and being really deep into the win probability analysis and fourth down analysis. Dan Campbell finished 15th overall last year, which is pretty good for a rookie coach with a not so good team, because a lot of times you see them finish pretty low in CCI because it's their first year. They don't want to look bad in their first year on the job, going for it, failing when they don't really have the team. But he was very aggressive and it finished 5th in our fourth down metric. And I remember one specifically last year. It was when their first win came against Minnesota. I think too late. They had 4th and 1 at their own 28, went for it, trying to get that to burn more clock. They failed, but they left Minnesota in scoring position, but they also left them with a short field and knowing, hey, if they score, there's probably going to be enough time. Well, sure enough, Minnesota scored a touchdown. Detroit went down, and that's when Jared Goff threw the game-winning touchdown as time expired. So I'm excited to see this one. Actually is tied for the highest total of the week this week. So expecting a lot of points in that one too. So I think that'll just be a fun matchup from that point. A lot of fantasy stars in that one, perhaps surprisingly from Detroit.
No, I really like what I see from Detroit so far. They were a fun bad team last year, a feisty bad team last year. And you mentioned all the fourth downs he does, but that's not even capturing how he's an underdog and plays with an underdog mentality. And they said, let's try everything. It's not just the fourth downs, but a lot of them are fake kicks, fake punts, or fake field goals. And there's a lot of onside kicks. And I don't know how many it's been, but enough that we remember a lot of his onside kicks. He had one in week 1 against Philadelphia in the third quarter. So he's still doing that. And last year, there was outside of Campbell, there wasn't a lot to like about this team. But this year, they're playing really well. Amon-Ra St. Brown's proven his rookie year is no fluke. DeAndre Swift has been very, very explosive, and they got Jamal Williams to be the workload back and let DeAndre be the it's almost like a basketball comparison. I'm dated. I don't watch a lot of modern basketball, but Jamal Williams is, if you will, bear with me here. He's Michael Jordan taking most of the shots, but when they need the three-pointer, the long ball, they go to DeAndre Swift to play Steve Kerr. So he's like he's the long ball specialist, and it's working for him. And Aiden Hutchinson's got a bunch of sacks already. There's stars in Detroit now like they haven't had in a long time.
Yeah, that one should be really fun. Division matchup too. The other one I do want to mention, not going to go too deep in it because it's kind of self-explanatory. Not so much of a coaching matchup, but Green Bay, Tampa Bay. We got Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. I think only have faced each other a handful of times. You've got Tampa Bay with a lack of wide receivers, and you've got, or potentially lack of wide receivers. Mike Evans' suspension was upheld. Not so sure about Godwin and Julio Jones. And then you've got Green Bay, who's got a lack of proven talent at receiver. Sammy Watkins was involved the other night, had a pretty good game, 3 or 4 catches for 80 yards, whatever it was. Lazard came back and caught a touchdown. But outside of that, they're really just trying to lean on the running game with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So be interesting to see how that plays out between those teams. We saw Tampa Bay win that NFC Championship game a couple years ago with the controversial fourth down field goal decision from LaFleur. But just 2 of the greatest quarterbacks to go at it. Again, like I said, more of a quarterback matchup than a coaching matchup for me there. Just I think the biggest game, that is the afternoon, 4:30, the big game. So that one looking forward to. So that will do it for us here on our Coach Ranking Show for week 2. Again, be sure to join us on the FO Discord tomorrow. That's Thursday night, unless you're seeing this on Thursday. Or if you're seeing this on Friday or Saturday, we've also got the FO Discord go up on Sunday, and then throughout the Monday Night Football game as well. Don't forget about FO Plus, where you get access to our betting picks, both against the spread and straight up with confidence as well. It'll order them by our confidence in those picks. You get a lot of really good premium articles and statistics on our site, as well as weekly fantasy rankings and research tools there. And then don't forget about that free $100. Like I said at the top of the show, I think everyone likes free money. You can get $100. Underdog will match your deposit up to that $100 using promo code Outsiders. Vince, thank you for joining us. We're 2 weeks through. It seems like before we know it, we're going to be talking about playoff picture and coaches getting fired. So for now, let's just enjoy the football we've got, and we'll see you next week.